الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الحدي حدي محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending immense greetings and salutations upon the final Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Before we enter into the topic of, or the entitled topic of etiquettes of seeking knowledge, it would be appropriate to first to look at the virtues of the fada'il or fadl al-ilm, the virtue of knowledge, or ahmiyatul ilm, the importance of knowledge that it plays in the life of not just a human being, but in specific for a Muslim. And likewise, what are some of the fruits of this divine knowledge? Because many of us, unfortunately, more and more begin to take Islam as a religion, even though Islam is not a religion, it's a way of life, it's a deen of academia. And maybe possibly because many of us are brought up in the Western world of education, just for the sake of education, doesn't hold any spirituality, it's just facts and figures and just general knowledge. And this is a wrong approach to have towards the blessed sciences or the Islamic knowledge. Islamic knowledge isn't based for a person to discover how much they know or how much they can learn. Islam, the key element is what you know and what you implement. That's how simple Islam is. And it's quite sad that we know that many of us Muslims begin to go into a modernistic approach of Islam, that we read much, but our implementation is unfortunately very minimal. And so we need to possibly, maybe if the statement is true, read less and try to implement more, would be my personal advice to myself and then to the rest of you respected brothers and sisters. So we know that ilm, knowledge, has a very important factor for Muslim, because even the first ayat of the Quran inside Surah Al-Alaq that we find has a key hidden message if we ponder over them. And I'm sure all of us have come across the story of the revelation and how revelation is brought down. Anyhow, inside Surah Al-Alaq we find whereby Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. So read, proclaim. So this is the first word of the Quran. What does this entail? And here we find that this is going back to the verb qara'a, to read or to recite. So this is highlighting an emphasis about the importance of reading, of reciting. And likewise the verse then mentions at a later stage, عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ, taught man that which he did not know. That is the essence of a human being, is we do not have the knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows the knowledge upon us and gives us the tawfiq and ability to understand certain things of this dunya. عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ, taught man via the use of the pen. That comes another ishara about the use of knowledge is via the use of the pen. Thus you find some of the ulama mention قَيِّدُ الْعِلْمَ بِالْكِتَابَ, restrict your knowledge, codify your knowledge via writing it. Some people have a strong ability to memorize and retain it inside their mind and their chest. But at the same time you find many in the ulama of hadith talk about those individuals who scribe their knowledge, keep it codified. And thus we find that the whole surah in the Quran, the 68th chapter of the Quran, also points to this factor as well, which is called Surah Al-Qalam. Noon wal-qalami wama yasturun, by the letter harf noon, and by the pen, by what it scribes. So this is again another ishara towards the concept of ilm, of gaining that knowledge and codifying that knowledge. وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took you out of the wombs of your mothers and you did not know anything. That is the essence of the human being. Man has not been bestowed with knowledge. Man has to gain and earn that knowledge. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the faculties of hearing, of seeing, and the feelings inside your heart. For what reason have these faculties been given? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, that you may be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So prime essence of gaining knowledge is to show gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus you find وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشُّكُورِ, only a few servants are truly devout and sincere and grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the beginning of knowledge is to recognize the Creator. That is the all-important knowledge. The rest of the knowledge that we study in this world, ulama have codified it in various divisions. That knowledge which is mustahab, that knowledge which is recommended, that knowledge which is fardul kifaya, that some people have to gain that knowledge, whether it be the knowledge of medicine, the knowledge of other forms of knowledges which are very important for us Muslims, even more and more today. And then you find that knowledge which is compulsory. The compulsory knowledge is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is incumbent upon every single Muslim to learn. Ma'rifatullahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, to recognize and to know the Creator. As the Quran mentions, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لِذَنْبِكَ. Have knowledge that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this knowledge, the ulama classified as ilmu tawheed, the knowledge of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rest of the branches of knowledge, Islamic knowledge, all split away or all flow from this one prime knowledge. When a person has belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has that conviction, has that understanding, then it becomes easy for the individual to understand ahadith. It becomes easy for the individual to implement them, to practice them. Whereas at many times we may be looking at other sources of knowledge and we begin to lose focus upon the prime initial stage of gaining of knowledge is the recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus we find that this knowledge, or the use of even the intellect at certain stages, has been praised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that the human beings have been raised and excelled even beyond the angels. And we know the angels, خُلُقَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ مِن نُور, angels have been created from light. Never disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. Never disobey the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and carry out whatever they've been told to do. So how can the human being begin to excel even beyond the angels? And a long discussion begins to take place right in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, I'm going to place a viceroy, a vicegerent, a leader upon the earth. And then the angels began to highlight, how can you place someone on the earth? Are we not sufficient to praise you and to glorify you and to make mention of you? So the angels thought they're the only ones that remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are you going to create a group of people who are going to spill blood and create fasad upon the earth? And here ulama tafasir begin to discuss that. How can the angels have this understanding about the corruption on the earth? One interpretation we mentioned is because the jinn used to live upon the earth and their spilling of the blood and the fasad they created. And the other understanding, which is even plausible today, that we can recognize masses of human beings go around spilling blood and creating fasad. So this insight of the angels holds true, that in general the human being unfortunately does create fasad upon the earth and does spill blood. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that I'm going to bless this type of creation, or this creation, beginning with Adam alayhi salam, and taught him the names of everything. And then exposed Adam alayhi salam to the angels and asked the angels, what are the names? That's why ulama tafasir, they mention the names of colors, of trees, of plants, the fish in the ocean, the animals, the science of botany, all types of discussions we mentioned that Adam alayhi salam has been taught. And then what did the angels do? قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا إِلَّا مَا عَلَّمْتَنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. The angels had to submit. Glorified you are, that our knowledge is restricted. So here the human being's knowledge and capability and ability goes beyond the angels. And a key element why the human being is also lifted above the angels is because the use of the rational, the mind, to decide to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereby the angels don't have that choice. So the insan, the human being, becomes the best creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if it recognizes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the same time, unfortunately, we find ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. The human being also becomes the worst of the creation. becomes the lowest of the low. As you find the Quran at times uses harsh words about people who don't recognize the Creator. Inna sharra dawabi indallahi, the most evil of creation, the beasts, are those people who disbelieve, who don't pay any attention. At times it praises them about this dunya, then it defames them. The beginning of Surah Rum that we find the 30th chapter of the Quran, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. They know the external factors of this dunya, the turuq, shawari', the streets, the infrastructure, the buildings, the skills, the ability, it's all there. Praise in the Quran. But then the Quran mentions, وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. But as for the akhirah, they're ghafilun, they're heedless. They're lost plots, they're lost, soulless, they have no vision towards the akhirah. And that's unfortunately what many of us Muslims are beginning to fall into that pattern, that we think that the only way that Islam will come once again is this technical approach, a life of academia, that we reach that same academic level as the Western world, then we will begin to compete with them. That may be possibly true, that we need to have certain infrastructures in place, but that's not the deeper understanding of Islam, that we need to have those finer skills to reach Islam, to come to that stage once again. And that's what ulama mentioned, the reason why ilm has become so weak in our times, it's clearly visible. Amongst the reasons being mentioned is that the Western world, of its development of its education system, which has been planted upon many of the Muslim lands. If you go and look at the ta'aleem in our countries, su'u khutut ta'aleem, why are many of us foreign students here anyway? Do you really think it's just a piece of paper, isn't it? It's just a piece of paper. But obviously they've developed a system. All praise goes to them for developing that system. Whereby years ago, centuries ago, they used to send the leaders of this country to Al-Andalus, which was the hub of knowledge. The leaders of this country in many of the Western countries used to send their own children, the kings and the queens, they used to send them to us and learn the various sciences from us. And now today we have to pay 10,000-15,000 pounds just to come here, just to learn a basic foundation English lesson, and then we have to spend many thousands just to graduate. And even then, our capability is basically not much. It's not much, because we're not using the elite of our individuals to go back to our countries and go back to the Muslim world and to benefit them. And even when we do return back some of these individual elite, they've become modernistic in their thinkers, in their thought, in their perception. They think that modernism is the only way forward. They've been so impressed by the modernistic way of life, they forget spirituality. And that's when you begin to find that harb, that warfare begins to take place between us, the religious clerics, and those secularists who begin to come back from the Western world and say, you religious clerics, what do you know about the real world? Well, alhamdulillah, many of the religious clerics are beginning to change and come into the Western world as well, but at the same time hold on to this spirituality, to inshallah to bridge the gap, that we need both of these sciences to go forward. Likewise, we find da'ful al-himam, we find that our commitment has become weakened. The commitment of an average Muslim is very, very weak. Many Muslims just think, well, just let life get by, just be an average individual. We don't have time for just an average individual anymore. You know, if you have lofty goals, lofty aspirations, then you have to go to the upper limit. Don't just think about becoming the average individual. Likewise, find exposure of this dunya, that most of us Muslims, unfortunately, what are we worried about? Play and amusement. Wherever you travel at the moment, we have more emphasis which is placed upon play and amusement than actual studious studying. And you can see even in general when you speak to people at university, the type of subjects that they're doing, the type of environment that they're living, it's not wholesome, it's not healthy. Likewise in the Muslim world as well. So these are reasons that begin to weaken the concept of knowledge. Likewise, it's been prophesied by the Prophet Muhammad that there will come a time whereby the committing of fornication will be dominant, the drinking of alcohol, and knowledge will begin to decline. And how will knowledge begin to decline? Knowledge will begin to decline via the death of the ulama. And you find that ignorant people become the leaders and people in authority, and they will give false verdicts or incorrect verdicts, and they will be misguided and misguide other individuals. Don't we find that at the moment in the Western world? How many weird and wonderful verdicts do we find? People allowing possibly the drinking of alcohol, the taking of riba, the allowing of free mixing, whatever it may be. Every day you find new verdicts begin to take place, because this is from babu darura, from a necessity of life. Because why? It's being brainwashed into our brains that, Islam is not practical for the 21st century. So the first thing we need to dig out of our brains and our heart, whatever our level of Islam or knowledge may be, that Islam is practical for every time and every place. That's the first thing that we need to develop, that knowledge within ourselves. Whether we get to the end result or we don't get to the end result. That is what we need to chip away from our mind and from our hearts. That uproot that from our hearts and our mind, that Islam is not practical. Islam is not implementable anymore. That is what we need to take out. And the rest will all come into place. That's the initial stage. And wherever you go now, more and more Muslims begin to question. Not worried about non-Muslims. That's their job at the end of the day. Their task is obviously to throw doubts upon Islam. But the sad fact is that more and more Muslims are beginning to weaken in their vision of Islam and the perception of knowledge. And likewise, many ulama have talked about, even when people talk about the resurgence of Islam, you have many weird and wonderful parties and movements in universities who talk about the relifting of the Islamic world and the empire, etc. Then a simple lesson. The Islamic Sahwatul Islamiyah, there is such a word, the Islamic resurgence or reawakening has to contain knowledge. There is no way that Islam will rise with ignorant people, because empty cans make a lot of noise. Hot air balloons, they burst very quickly, and that's what we have at the moment. And some of these individuals, with all honesty, if you ask them to judge by the Quran and the Sunnah, you find not in the English language. The Quran and Sunnah is to be judged in the Arabic language. That is the essence of judging. And many of these individuals, if not all of them, including myself, we don't have the credentials to do that. So it's a very long, tedious journey. So when people think that everything will just change in a matter of day and night, it's not true. But at the same time, we shouldn't lose heart, because many of these factors that we find around us, great ulama like Ibn Taymiyyah, Shawullah, Al-Dahlwi, other ulama, they were surrounded by some of these hardships. They didn't say, let's just stop, because it's been prophesied that knowledge will begin to plummet. Let's just stop. They continued the journey. So likewise, we have to continue the journey of reawakening ourselves and coming back to those important factors. Likewise, on a principle inside of Usul al-Fiqh as well, مَا لَا يَتِمُّ الْوَاجِبْ بِهِ فَهُوَ وَاجِبْ. Whatever is obligatory and it needs to be carried out, which is compulsory, whatever is linked to that obligation becomes an obligation as well. It may sound slightly rhetorical, but just to make you understand it quite in easier terms. For example, we all know that to pray, prayer is an obligation. Just like we pray the Alhamdulillah Salatul Bahar, it's an obligation. Whatever is linked to that obligation also becomes obligatory. So what is linked to that obligation is the wudu, the performance of the ablution. So ablution becomes an obligation for that prayer. So likewise, our life, part of our life living on this earth, the knowledge becomes an obligation. So it's not something that some people think it's for some people and not for other people. There's certain basic knowledge that we all need to gain. How we offer our prayers, those of us who are planning to go for Hajj, how to perform the Hajj. Likewise, if we're involved in business transactions, how do we engage in them, and basic elementary halal, haram, it's all for us to learn. But more and more we find that unfortunately many young Muslims living in this country don't know how to perform wudu, don't know how to pray, don't know how to fast, don't even know what's basic halal, what's haram. And that's a very shallow level to fall at. Very shallow level that we've fallen at, because obviously we work with different, doesn't mean that we're belittling any individual, but we work with different individual organizations. We can see that maybe sometimes our benchmark is in the wrong location. That if you look at an average individual in this country, you find that they are unfortunately, quote unquote, very ignorant of their deen. So knowledge, and it is something that we should take it as something very important. We find in the prophetic hadith narrated in the Sahih of the Sunan of Ibn Majah, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيدَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. To seek knowledge is an obligation upon every single Muslim. Some people try to make this addition of Muslimatin as well, and every female as well. And this addition is incorrect according to ulama of hadith, as Imam al-Sakhawi and likewise Ibn Jawzi and Shaykh Nasruddin al-Albani have classified that addition as something which is rejected. Does that mean that the hadith is now being sexist? No, in the Arabic language, when you use the word Muslim, it entails both male and female. That's when the Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, that entails both. That khitab is for both men and women. So knowledge is incumbent upon both men and women to gain that knowledge. The only reason I mention this shows the accuracy of knowledge. That's what we're trying to highlight, the etiquettes of knowledge. Because some people just try to, wherever you gain knowledge, just drink that knowledge. No. Authenticity has a big role to play in the gaining of knowledge. Just like today, if I lectured, something to do with maybe medicine, and those of you studying medicine may think, maybe he's got the gift of the gab, but then I make a big blunder in some technical terminology, and those of you specialist individuals recognize, he's not really a medic student. So how can he talk about medics? And that's why when it comes to this world, when some people talk about Islam, sounds the gift of the gab, then you begin to think, that's not really Islamic what the person's quoting. They don't really have the credentials to mention that. So because why? At times the authenticity is questionable. And likewise your lecturer will mention something, Einstein's theory that he mentioned this in this book, and you go back and you read that theory, you read that concept, you think, my teacher, my lecturer, he's a damn good lecturer. Because whatever he quotes, there's a path of authenticity and it exists. Now if I come along and I quote you Islam, and then you go back and you find in the text that the quotation is totally incorrect. What I've quoted has been misquoted. What I've quoted, I've missed out certain extracts. Then you know what you have to basically begin to do? You have to place a question mark next to that person. Because there are people, unfortunately, who misinterpret Islam intentionally at times. There are people who misquote Islam for their own personal interests, for their own source, for their own welfare. So the most important concept of the searching of knowledge is to look at authenticity. Doesn't mean we're all human beings, we all make mistakes. But if in general a person quotes 80 to 90%, what their quotations are based upon the Quran and Sunnah, and you can go back and you can read, find those quotations, that's something acceptable. As for human beings, we all we make mistakes. Imam Malik said, everybody's statements are taken and rejected, except for Sahibu Hadil Qabr, except for the companion of his grave. And he was pointing to the Prophet Muhammad because Imam Malik was known as Imam Darul Hijrah, never left Medina in his life. Only time he left Medina was to perform Hajj. Never would come out of Medina. At the same time, you find his famous quotation that Imam Malik shows their rank of knowledge and their humility, unlike today whereby everybody claims to be a scholar in their own right. A man came from Iraq and asked him some 33, 36 odd questions. Imam Malik said, Rahmatullah la adri ma indi ilm wallahu a'lam ma a'lam la a'lam, don't know, I don't have the knowledge, Allah and His Messenger know best, I don't know. The man said, Gaif, he said, how is this possible? I've come all the way from Iraq to ask you these numerous questions, and you're the great Imam Malik of Medina. What should I go back and tell the people? He said, go and tell the people that Imam Malik la ya'rif, Imam Malik la yadri, he doesn't know, finish. Go and tell the people that I don't know. So a person is not obliged to give an answer to everything. A person isn't obliged to have a knowledge of every single thing. Because we know, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Man has only been given a small amount of knowledge. Our knowledge is very, very small. Just like going back to the perception of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, whereby both of them are in the boat. Remember, Khidr was the most knowledgeable individual from one angle, and Musa alayhi was the most knowledgeable from another angle on that planet at that stage. Both of them combined at the brink of that boat. Khidr mentions to Musa alayhi salam that my knowledge and your knowledge is just like the amount of water that went into the beak of this bird. And the rest of that ocean is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So above every knowledgeable individual, there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because arrogance, that's what destroys people as well. Because some people, when they gain knowledge, they think they have a right over other individuals. Knowledge, it humbles a person, brings about humility. So Quran mentioned, وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. Show goodness to people like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed goodness to you. So when a person learns knowledge, they're trying to gain it to better their own selves. First, as we mentioned, to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to better their own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to better their family members and their loved ones around them, and likewise to, inshallah, hopefully influence the wider community or the closer community around them. But at the same time, the way that you influence that community, is it via arrogance? Was I not a young boy once and someone took me by the hand and said, look, this is not right, this is halal, this is haram, and taught me? So why shouldn't I return back to society and give it in the same way? Teach the people in a good way, which are etiquettes of knowledge. Thus we find that beautification, presenting things in a good manner, in an easy manner, that has a bigger impact upon the community than the use of harshness. Thus you find, يَسِّرُوا وَلَا تُعَسِّرُوا, be easy, be lenient towards people, do not be difficult. بَشِّرُوا وَلَا تُنَفِّرُوا, give people glad tidings, don't push people away. So that is also the etiquettes of gaining the knowledge and then presenting the knowledge. Also we find at times psychologically that many of us, we become so full of ourselves, we think that we can at times begin to challenge any people of seniority or people who have more knowledge than us. It doesn't mean that at times we can't challenge them, we can't pose certain questions to them and ask them. I mean, that's acceptable, but there's certain etiquettes. But the wavelength at the moment in this country, unfortunately, that people begin to study the deen after 6 months, after 1 year, after 2 years, they start making such bold statements that Shaykh huwa jahil, ma ya'rif shay, ma ya'lam. Shaykh doesn't know, he's ignorant, he has no understanding, he's a sellout, he's this, he's that. We've heard these statements. What type of mentality is this? We differ with many of our teachers. At times we got thrown out of the class. At times we were told to shut up and sit down. But to this day, never lost respect for them. As soon as we came out the lecture theatre, they're still like our father, still like our teacher, still beloved to us. So there's certain etiquettes that in this country you will never learn them, because people are always trying to deliver a different type of message that you can become over those individuals. I want to give 2 examples on a psychological basis to help understand the picture we may make us reflect. Those of us who have children, you find that in general, that when you have a child, you find that a child at a certain age begins to think that the father or mother, using this word linguistically, knows everything. That's normal. A child will look up at a mother or father and think, every time I ask them, they'll give the right answer. As a child begins to get to the age of 10, 11, you find that there's certain things that, that the father may not know, the mother may not know. For example, the football teams, names of players, or whatever it may be, certain sporting activities or movies, whatever it may be. So the child begins to think, that I maybe know 30% of knowledge more than my father or my mother. When it comes to the age of 11 plus, you find it begins to become 50-50. It comes to our teens, we think, my parents, what do they know about life? What do they know about life? I'm much more knowledgeable than them. And this factor that we find, that there's something that still exists in the parents that doesn't exist in the children. You may excel in certain aspects of knowledge, but a life experience will always be there. That is one key thing that Islam focuses on, even when it talks about fiqh al-zawaj. Many respected sisters just come that my father is not a good wali, whatever it may be. If you go back and read the books of the fiqh, because many times we try to impress these views that people try to come along, that I don't need to do this, I don't need to do that. If you go back and read the works of the fuqaha, the classical fuqaha, they mention the reason why the wali, the guardian, is because of the experience of life. Is one deep reason. Because in general, a father will not go for a person who is going to be behaving ill towards his daughter. That's a general perception. So that's why that father has that wavelength or that insight of what he's trying to search for, which sometimes we're trying to bypass, thinking I have more experience than him. No, you don't have more experience than the person. And likewise, this concept of knowledge. If you think you're a damn good student, if you think that you're reading every single day, you're studying every single week, you're studying every single year, what makes you think that a damn good teacher has stopped studying and stopped reading and stopped carrying on gaining knowledge? And thus in general what will begin to take place is the bridge, the gap will never come together. There'll always be a gap. That's something many of us don't seem to understand. We think that we've bridged the gap. How can we bridge the gap with some of our teachers who've been studying for 50, 60 years of their life? How can a person in 5 years of reading begin to become equal to a person who's been praying and fasting and studying knowledge for 60 years of their life? Mush ma'qool, as Egyptians say. It doesn't make sense. That doesn't mean you won't be able to bridge the gap. Sometimes you will bridge the gap. Allah subhanahu will bridge certain individuals. They will far excel their teachers. But that's the general perception. You're not going to live in the West and think that you're going to excel someone who's been studying Islamic sciences for 60 years, 70 years of their life. Another sickness that we find in the etiquettes of knowledge is going back to the image of a picture. Sometimes you find a picture has been painted by a painter, for example. The painter here is, for example, a religious scholar. And there happens to be one small blemish on that picture. What do many of us begin to do? We begin to home in on those few dots which are incorrect. We begin to microscopically begin to focus upon them and say, look, this ink or this paint is the wrong paint to use. If only he or she had used this other type of ink. So we spend 2 or 3 years just focusing, homing in on those 2 or 3 dots. And then we say that, this picture isn't a complete picture. We can all conclude the picture is what? The picture is complete. It only has a few dots which are missing. And when you highlight that to the person who painted the picture, they will come back and do what? They will come back and they will complete the picture. Many of us have just got those dots. We don't have a picture and we think we've got a picture. We're just focusing on the dots. We don't have a picture. That's the reality. So that's once again etiquettes of knowledge the person needs to develop. Likewise, find at-tawadu, humility. Like a tree, the more fruits it bears. What happens to a tree the more fruits it bears? It begins to bow down in humility. It comes down, it lowers the branches. That's what knowledge does to a person. As for many of us, we don't even have any fruits and we stand arrogantly as a tree. That's not the real concept of knowledge. That a knowledge creates humility, it creates the ability of awareness. Likewise, we find that the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed of seeking knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises the rank of that individual. A person who seeks the Islamic knowledge or the Islamic sciences, they become what is classified as warathatul anbiya. They become inheritors of the prophets who don't leave behind dinar wala dirham. Don't leave behind the dinar or dirham, or today's language, the pound and the dollar. And this is another weakness that's developed amongst ourselves. If we've begun to picture Islamic knowledge as it's for those mutawwi'un, those religious people, the mad mullahs, whatever we call them, or the people who don't really have good brain cells. Because many of us, we grew up with that, isn't it? Anybody who's messing about in school, then you get sent to the madrasa, you get sent to Darul Ulum, or you get sent to Jamia Islamiyah, you get sent to Islamic Institute to go and learn. Because you know why? You're just a troublemaker, and it's not good to have you in society. At least religious knowledge would codify you. So we send the people, not the elite of our students, those of our children who have good skills and ability, we want to send them to Eton High School, we want to send them to Oxford, we want to send them to Cambridge, we want to pull out their fees. Even in the religious world, that's what happens. Even in the religious world, most of the clerics want to send their children to other places, because why? They've broken inside their hearts that vision. They're broken inside their hearts. So they want to think that maybe I've missed the boat, I've missed my understanding. No. Those of us bright individuals should be gaining the knowledge of the dunya, and before that the knowledge of the akhirah, the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. And you'll become a powerful tool. You'll become a very powerful tool when you engage in da'wah and you preach to people. Because we know many times when we're preaching, we're having discussions with non-Muslims, they say, well, it sounds good what you say about the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognition of the Creator, but what's your credentials? Well, I don't have any credentials. I don't have a PhD, I don't have a thesis, I don't have a master's, I don't have anything. Well, we can't really take it on board. But imagine now, if you've got those qualifications, that person's going to stop and think, he is far more educated than me, quote unquote. He doesn't bow down to a rock or a stone or his own desires. What is he doing? That will entice some of these people, because some in the academic world, many of these professors, how if you go and look at their spiritual life, and you'll be bamboozled by the type of evil things they believe in, devil worship and all types of things that you find they're inclined to, but obviously they don't profess it. And then when you present Islam to them, obviously there's a barrier, because they see that we are ill-educated, we're illiterate individuals. There's nothing really to present to them. They see, Muslims in general seen as third-class citizens. We need to be taught, we need to be refined. That's why half the time in our countries refine us individuals, aren't they? To teach us a better way of life. We're happy with our way of life. We sit on the floor, we eat, we drink. That's simple life. We're happy with that. They're saying we're going to take Afghanistan back into the medieval times. Well, Afghanistan was always in the medieval times. Leave it alone then. They're happy. Go and ask the average person. They say, I'm happy with my life. We don't want modernism. We're happy the way we live. So let us live in a life of... Obviously there's other intentions, maybe the gas and the oil that exists in our countries, serves, will help, save the credit crunch. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Those people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ulama. Meaning anybody who tries to gain knowledge, that creates fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So knowledge creates recognition and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like as I began with, many of us begin to follow a life of academics. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's good. But if your knowledge is not making you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not making you recognize the Creator, making you become more devoted, make you to be worried about what's halal, what's haram, then may Allah forbid that knowledge could be an evidence against the person and not for them. And that's dangerous. That's very, very dangerous. That knowledge could become an evidence over the person rather than for the person. Likewise, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Say, are they equal, the people who know and the people who don't know? They're not equal in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, praise the individuals who have knowledge. شَهِدَ اللَّهُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمِ. In the beginning of Surah Al-Imran, if I'm not mistaken, شَهِدَ اللَّهُ, Allah makes testimony that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise the angels and وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ, people of knowledge, people of understanding, recognize the Creator, recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what knowledge does. It begins to recognize the Creator and serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinn and the human beings except for to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's when you have that correct intention and knowledge, everything about your life becomes ibadah. Even studying here in the university, whatever it may be, that becomes ibadah. If you know what your intent is, you're not here just studying fashion design, textile management or something in some frivolous subject that we find that people just for the sake of coming to university. You're studying a deep science, a deep subject that's going to better yourself, and even more so it's going to have a positive contribution to the Muslim Ummah. That's what we need. We need those skills. We need those abilities that's going to have a positive impact upon our wider community. And remember, as I began, we can see how our community is focusing upon certain sciences which are not beneficial at all. Irrespective of what anyone says, we can see they are not beneficial to the person themselves or neither to the wider community. Likewise, when Allah kind of raises the rank of those individuals who've been given any knowledge. And also with knowledge, you have to, as we mentioned, you have to gain that knowledge. Because sometimes people are just full of emotional feeling and begin to do certain actions. That's why Imam Bukhari in his Sahih begins in one of these chapters, he mentions Al-ilmu qabla al-amal. Qawlu al-ilm qabla al-amal. You need the statement of having knowledge before action. So that's what Islam is based upon. Islam isn't just go and do whatever you want to do. Islam is firstly, know what the knowledge is. That's why you find that knowledge, if you have the right knowledge, is better than doing immense actions. If you have the right knowledge, because some people that you find that their actions will just unfortunately become null and void because they don't have the correct knowledge or they don't have the correct intention while they're gaining that knowledge. So that correct intention or that correct orthodox knowledge will go a long way in helping the individual today, and likewise tomorrow, and later on even the person leaves the dunya. And thus we find that various virtues we mentioned, those people who know, or those people, the virtue of the people who have knowledge is like the moon over the stars. Stars are many shining stars there are. Don't many people, they pray, they do certain actions, but they don't really know why they're doing those actions. Thus we find that the role of an imam, the role of a sheikh is sometimes powerful. Sometimes people say that, no, how can any one person change any society? Yes, it's happened many times. It's happened many times that single individuals taken a stance inside society that's benefited the Muslim world. The stances that they took, because they took those stances based upon knowledge. And thus the Quran mentions that those individuals are the real individuals who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise find other passages, they are the ones who convey the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear no one except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is what knowledge begins to develop within the individual. The best knowledge, as we mentioned, is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then secondly, after that becomes the laws, the rules and regulations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sharia. Many of us are devoid of the sharia, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The large portion, yes, we recite in a melodious tone, we're familiar with various recitals and recitations that exist. That is something excellent, there's no doubt about that. But also a large portion of the Quran, that this is a book of governance, of sovereignty, to be legislated and to be ruled by. That's something that some of us, we begin to slip by our mind. So the only way to go back to the Quran is to study the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as also what's known as ulama collected, what's known as ahkamul Quran. Many of the ulama wrote their works of tafasir based upon the rules and regulations inside the Quran. Thus a person goes to the Quran to study rules and regulations, that they may then begin to implement the rules and regulations. It's also a deeper science that needs to be revitalized amongst many of us. Likewise we mentioned the knowledge of the Quran, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best amongst you is he who learns the Quran and teaches it to other individuals. That's also good science. How many times we find that people cannot even recite the Quran appropriately? That's quite sad. When we're Muslims, we cannot even read the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. English is not the Quran. English is just a rough rendition of the plausible meanings. The real essence of the Quran is the Arabic language. And don't be surprised, there's many Arabs who can't even read the Quran appropriately. And sometimes people like to say, because sometimes we've had this experience, because you're a non-Arab, that's why you need to study Islam more than us. But we know, according to the world, كل من نطق بالعربية فهو العرب. Whoever speaks Arabic is classified as an Arab. Finish. Let's finish. End of story. So the essence of all of us, is to go back to the pure, pristine Arabic language to understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be able to recite it and to extract the gems from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, if we cannot go to that level of becoming scholars, etc., then at least try to be an individual who is learning. Because the whole of this world, of this dunya mal'una, is cursed. إِلَّا عَالِمًا أَوْ مُتَعَلِّمًا, except for a scholar or the one who's trying to learn. or the dhikr of Allah, وَمَا وَالَاهُ, that which is linked to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other than that, everything is cursed. Everything is basically a waste of time. So either being a teacher, or trying to become a teacher, or learning, or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something beneficial. If not, then the rest of this dunya has been cursed. There's no benefit in this dunya. And thus we know that when a person dies, everything comes to a standstill of an individual. Everything comes to a standstill of an individual. Amongst those things that will benefit us will be an ongoing charity, or ilmun yuntafa' bihi, or some knowledge a person needs behind that people benefit from that knowledge. What are the ways that people can benefit from the knowledge? It may not necessarily be delivering the knowledge. It may be printing the books, the leaflets, the Quran, pamphlets, whatever it may be, organizing things, distributing material. That's a contribution to spreading knowledge that will benefit the individual. Or waladun salih yad'u lahu, or a righteous son or a daughter that will pray for the individual. How are you going to gain that righteous son or a daughter? Obviously, firstly by praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then taking that effort and that time to teach your children. That's what Quran mentions, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Oh, you believe, save yourselves and your family members from the hellfire. If you leave your children for 8 hours, 9 hours to the state system, etc., what else do you expect them to pick up? It's our role. That is how we make the Muslim society. You begin with your own self, begin with your family members, and then the message begins to deliver it even further. But sometimes we just begin to become candles, light for other individuals, and we burn ourselves away. That's what a candle does, gives light to everyone else. But eventually it begins to wither away, burn away. That's what many of us have become, unfortunately. Candles for other individuals, but not candles for our own selves. Likewise, find that the person who's out studying knowledge, you find many ahadith praising that person as if they are out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fi sabilillah. Hatta you find some ulama go to the view that the ayat inside Surah At-Tawbah, the end of Surah At-Tawbah, that there has to remain a group of people, لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, who study the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They use this ayat to prove a point that the people of knowledge are superior than even to the mujahideen. They use this ayah at the end of Surah At-Tawbah. You can go back and look at this ayah and read the tafsir of this ayah, how some ulama have taken that view. Because the ayah is praising that those people who return back from the battlefield, they need to come back to a group of people who will teach them, لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, teach them the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they need those individuals. That's why ulama mentioned there's two elements. One is struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ilm, and both of them need to exist together to bring about once again the glorious day of Al-Islam once again. Likewise, find what are the fruits of knowledge. The fruits of knowledge will only begin to take place, اقتران العلم بالعمل, the linking of knowledge with action. That is whereby the fruits will begin to take place. That's why you find in the Quran, the hadith, they curse a certain group of individuals, is either they had the knowledge and they went away from the path, or they done actions without any knowledge. And that's why in this ummah, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, we made you the middle nation. The way that a person will be successful with the knowledge that they gain is to link their knowledge with actions. If not, there will be no benefit of that knowledge. And that's why you find numerous ayat in the Quran directly, indirectly sending out the message, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ كَبُرَ مَقْتًا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَن تَقُولُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Oh, you believe, why do you say that which you don't do yourself? Grave it is in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You tell people one thing, you don't do it yourself. Likewise, find in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, تَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. Quran begins with this. In the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ, are you telling people to do good deeds? You know, people, we have to come out and we have the Islamic week and whatever it may be, the Dawah stores calling non-Muslims to Islam. You know, sometimes personally we don't need to. If we just behave as Muslims and live as Muslims, that's da'wah done. Isn't it? Because many times we're just trying to brush away the contradictions. One person walks by with a hijab, one person walks in a state of nudity. Hi, I'm a Muslim as well. One of us is drunk in the bar, one of us is walking with a flowing beard. I'm a Muslim as well. But I thought you're not allowed to drink. I thought you have to wear a hijab. I thought you're not allowed to do this. So most of the time we're just spending trying to remove that myth. That what does Islam really mean? Because some people coming along and saying, well, this is all part of Islam as well. The multiculturalism that we find, it's all supposed to be. Or maybe, I'm not British enough. Well, I think I'm British enough. The only thing I don't have is a Union Jack flag and a pint of beer in my hand. Apart from that, I know much about the British culture and the system, the way of life, the language. What more do you want me to possess? That's what many of us, we think that maybe that's the way that we need to go to present Islam to them, that show that, this is what Islam is. So if we just lived our life as Muslims and stuck to the halal and the haram, and even personally, how many people come to universities and they become on a great zeal and a passion, and they leave the university and then everything begins to just go out the window? Because sometimes the correct tarbiyah is not being given. The fundamental core thing that you can leave your university with, as I mentioned, I began with your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your punctuality and your commitment to the prayers. That's a key element. And then stick to the halal and avoid the haram. If you can come out of university in that mold, in that manner, then alhamdulillah, our objective has been completed. That is sufficient for the wider community. But obviously many of us, we think we're going to come out of university being Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, isn't it? We're going to be great big scholars. That's what we think, isn't it? Live a real practical world. Where are they when they come out of university? Where are they? Live a practical world of giving tarbiyah, the cultivation which is accurate and which is precise. وَلَكِنْ كُونُوا رَبَّانِيِّينَ. Become good teachers. Become murabbiyun. Become people giving the beneficial knowledge that will benefit the people both in this world and likewise inside the akhirah. So the most beneficial knowledge is that which leads to amal, that which leads to action, that which leads to awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why you find that when the Prophet Muhammad said to Mu'adh bin Jabal, اتَّقِ اللَّهَ حَيْثُمَا كُنْتَ. Fear Allah wherever you are. Wherever you are, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take that person, place him outside the Kaaba, he fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take him, place him outside 10 Downing Street, White House, still fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our problem is that sometimes outside the Kaaba we're weeping and we're crying, then we come out, we're in New York, then we're in Manhattan, then we're in London, and all types of things are taking place. No, that's not what Islam is. Islam is that wherever you go, you are trying your best. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as best as you can, to the best of your ability. That's what Islam is trying to indoctrinate within individuals, is their service and their commitment towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise the fruits of knowledge begin to take place when the person begins to implement the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed them with. Likewise you find وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهِ. Fear Allah and Allah will teach you. Because many people ask the question, how can I gain an Islamic perspective understanding this tafsir or this hadith, whatever it may be? The answer is in the Quran. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهِ. Fear Allah and Allah will teach you. Allah will bestow you with the knowledge, bestow you with the understanding. But if you don't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you may be bestowed with some elements of knowledge, but it will not be the deeper perception. That's you find out that ilm lahu halawa. It has this sweetness that when a person begins to tread the path of seeking knowledge and interpretation, you find it's a great blessing, a great sweetness that exists in the heart and the mind of the individual. One of the famous imams he mentioned, Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, لا يزال العالم جاهلا بما علم. A scholar is ignorant, or a person who's learning is ignorant with what they've learned, حتى يعمل به, until the person begins to implement what they've learned. فإذا عمل به كان عالما. That person is really to be classified as a scholar. So implementation takes you to the level of becoming a person who is a scholar. And then don't we find that weird and wonderful sites at the moment, weird and wonderful programs on television, on the dish, whatever, people coming there with all types of long titles and things, and coming with all weird and wonderful views that this is halal, this is not haram. And remember, there's certain key elements of Islam which are based upon foundations. Remember this as well inside university. If one person comes along, or a small fraction comes along and says that this action is halal, for example riba, usury, one small fraction of people come along and say this is something which is halal, and that person may be respected and beloved to us, may hold prestigious titles and ranks and positions, but Jamhurul Ulama, a large consensus of ulama, of 99.9% of scholars, are saying this is something which is haram, then remember this in your life. Don't go towards that 0.01%. Stick to the consensus. Because this ummah will never ever unite upon misguidance. Don't think that people of knowledge are dead or they're not present. There'll always be certain standard rules and regulations. There'll be unanimous agreement. So when a person begins to follow those weak interpretations, we're not misquoting them or belittling those individuals. They are beloved to us, but at times they have got it wrong, and we have to stray away from that. We have to stray away from that. Likewise, you find that sometimes people just like to shop around the Islamic knowledge, like to move from one view to another view. Always trying to find out what is the rukhas, what is the easiest, the lenient view. And this is a dangerous interpretation following knowledge as well. Because ulama mentioned, man tatabba rukhas, whoever follows the shortfalls or the easy options, because every scholar will have something easy or something they become lenient upon, either accidentally or because of lack of knowledge of the hadith or interpretation. If you begin to shop around and pick up all of those lenient views, you know the ulama have classified the individual as? They've classified the individual as becoming a zindiq, a heretic, a person who is straying away from the path. And that's what some of us, unfortunately, we're following that path. That we just begin to follow our lust and our desires, and this is not a codification of knowledge. So in conclusion, we find that we should begin to gain that knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that knowledge of Tawheed, which brings about the recognition and servitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you wherever you are, bima'na, He watches and sees over everything that we do. That's what that knowledge creates. That feeling inside the heart. Wherever I go, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over me. However I offer my prayers, in the prayer room, at home, in the masjid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. How can I hide? How I'm fasting, whatever I do, my etiquettes, my behavior is all being watched by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise you find, and then the person begins to strive. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Whoever strives in our paths, we will guide them to our paths. So if we want to make a positive contribution to the future of this Muslim ummah, then this is where it all begins. That a person begins to rectify the intention and begins to think about the long-term strategies. We don't know if we're going to live for a long term, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But there's no harm in thinking ahead, because many of us, we don't have a vision, we don't have a goal. We don't have a perception. Most of us, we walk out the lecture theatre now or every night, we don't really have a goal, do we? Even the Muslims who stand there, may pray 5 times a day, yes, we're going to conquer this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Come Salatul Fajr, lying in bed, sleeping, and talking about gaining big things. Life is a struggle. And credit, as I began, goes to these people, they've struggled hard over many of our lands and our places for 150 years to put us in that position. So we may have to strive far harder to come out of that situation that we are in. Likewise, find وَقُلِ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَ اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ. Carry on with your action, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you the reward of your actions. Maybe not inside this dunya, but maybe at a later stage, but at least we know that we have been throwing the seeds of that change. Even the day of judgment comes, we find in the prophetic tradition, the day of judgment being established, and you have some seeds inside your hand. Don't throw them away, you should plant them in the ground. Don't throw them away, plant them in the ground. So that's what we want to do right from now, is we want to go back and begin to plant the seeds. And remember, some fruits and some vegetables, they begin to sprout out very quickly. But the fruits of Islam, it will take many hundreds of years. And once it does begin to sprout, that essence, that asas of that tree, the roots of the tree will be firm, will be strong. And maybe somebody else will begin to pluck and eat from those lush fruits. Thus you find the Quran mentions about the parable of the tree. كَشَجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ أَصْلُهَا ثَابِتٌ وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ تُؤْتِي أُكُلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهَا. The good word, and the ulama of tafsir mention, like Imam Sa'di mentions, that the good word is none other than قَوْلُ لَا إِلَهِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. That is the branch, that is the main stalk of the tree, the roots of the tree. When that belief is firm, and then everything else begins to eventually come out and give good fruits. And we may eat from those fruits whilst we're alive. Maybe somebody else may come along and eat from those fruits. But we know, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never let your iman go to waste. Those are a few words I wanted to share to remind myself and the rest of you brothers and sisters about the role of knowledge, importance of knowledge, and the fruits of knowledge. وَأَقُولُ قَوْلِي هَذَا وَاسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهِ لِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بارك الله فيكم.